For those, if any of you don't know me, I'm Betty G. I'm one of the co-hosts, along with Sarup and Eveta Silova, Meredith Toth, in the past, Punya Mishra of the learning or the just an hour conversations, which we've been doing for the 2.5 years. Now we're almost halfway through the third year, and we're excited by the topic today. I will say Eveta was intending to facilitate, but I talked to her this morning. She is in Salem, Massachusetts, of all places, and apparently was having difficulty finding a quiet place to get an internet connection.
Ah,
And as we know, it's approaching Halloween. And if those of you have the same associations with Salem that I have of trials of witches and things, I guess it's a big holiday there. So I had a mental image of people running around in costume there, which just sort of added to the chaos. So Eveta said she would try to join, but we will step in and help facilitate if she can't make it. So I'll just jump in if it's okay, Saru, with
yes.
a few announcements before we get started with the actual discussion. So a couple things. Let me just see if I can paste this in. I think this session has been getting a lot of publicity, but oops, and it's too long. Let me cut off part of it. You may have seen flyers or posts about a session that's being organized by one of our Learning Futures collaboratives. It's called Stories from Home. And my initial post was too long, so I'll put the second part in there. Sounds like a great session. It will be held, I believe that's next Friday, November 1st at Mesa, the studios and Mesa Student Center. And they've got what sounds like a wonderful panel that will come together and help everyone there talk about our own personal stories and how they shape our identity. And something I think that's particularly important now with, sort of a lack of connection a lot of us are feeling, thinking about how we can use these kinds of stories to build community. So a different sort of event from some of the more traditionally academic ones that we advertise, but I encourage you, everyone's welcome. You can bring children, you can bring your family. So if you want something different to do next weekend, perhaps after you're recovering from Halloween, you might consider that event. Another really interesting one, and let's see if this will go over. Ooh, okay. This is going to go over. Oh, no. Okay, hold on. The event or the chat size. This has also recently been advertised. You might have seen an email about this. A war game film screening, October 30th. So also next week. This is a really interesting film. I won't say too much about it, except that when you can read about it at the link there, but it involves a simulation getting together the military leaders to actually simulate what might happen in a security crisis. So it's been touring around the country. We're really lucky to have a screening here. And I think the timing is interesting, given how close we are to the election and some of the conversations that have been going on there. So just wanted to share that too. And just one last note, please, we encourage you to consider attending our global engagement lunch. This is facilitated in particular by Avetta, but in collaboration with all of the college leadership. And we are excited by the opportunity to bring everyone together for lunch and to talk about different ways that everyone can be involved with global engagement. You don't have to be currently doing anything on the global scale to participate. In fact, we encourage folks who might not yet have that kind of engagement, but are interested to come and listen, hear what your colleagues are doing, and help us talk about ways that we can better infuse a global perspective throughout what we're doing in the college. So and I think that is the last announcement that I have. I did want to also mention, I think you all saw that in the invitation, that today's Just an Hour is a little bit different because we have two related sessions. The regular Just an Hour from 12 to 1 will focus on should you create a study abroad course, and we'll introduce our participants in a minute or two. And we also have a session from 1 to 2 p.m. And we're fortunate to have the ASU Global Education Director, Noah Rost, and Associate Director, Shira Burns, who will be joining us to talk about the more practical aspects of creating such a course if you're interested. So you do not need to stay for the whole 2 hours, but just wanted to let you know that will all be happening in this one Zoom space. So, Sarup, want to add anything else before we introduce our speakers or participants?
No, I think this is going to be an exciting time. I guess this is a great topic of interest for all faculty members. So I'm glad to see, participation in that, and looking forward to the panelists.
Well, and I can just go ahead then and introduce. I don't see Avetta here, so the topic for today is very interesting to me too, because before about a year or so ago, I had no idea that we could create study abroad courses, and certainly did not know we had faculty in the college who were doing so, and that it was something that was really supported by the university. So I assume that there's a lot of folks who are in the same position as I am, who are not really aware of what the opportunities are here. And another exciting thing about this is that study abroad courses often are cited by students as one of the most memorable experiences they have in their higher education experience, undergraduate as well as graduate level. And they also can be really rewarding, as we'll hear from faculty who choose to develop and participate in such courses, although I'm sure there are challenges, and we can also talk about that. Currently, we have a lot of interest. Avetta has given me the statistics, and I can't quote them off the top of my head, but apparently when they survey students, we have a lot of students in our college who are very interested in having some kind of study abroad experience. Yet we have very few courses, very few opportunities to give them to have that experience. And so many of our students actually go and take study abroad courses or participate in other study abroad programs in other colleges. So she's really enthusiastic about trying to recruit more folks to participate in this and to get the word out that it's quite possible and that we do have a fair amount of support for this. So what we've done today is ask some faculty who have done such programs to share with you some of their experiences. As typical with our Just an Hour sessions, the conversation is, intended to be open. We did not ask anyone to prepare a presentation, but rather to respond to some questions that we've prepared. We also encourage everyone to post questions or comments in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for your own questions and observations along with the participants. Just a reminder, I forgot to say this at the beginning, this session is being recorded, and you know that you can access all prior recordings at our Just an Hour website on the hub. So with that, why don't I'll introduce our guests, and then I'll just tell you who they are, and then we'll jump into asking them to say a little bit more about themselves and their experience. So we're delighted to have Sarah Carranza. And is Michelle here too with you, Sarah? I can't see. Is Michelle here?
She is. She's running late. She'll be here shortly.
Okay. Great. So Sarah and Michelle Jordan, who've done more than once, I think. I know you're doing one again this coming summer. A really cool course called Exploring STEM Education in Germany. So they'll be talking about their experiences. And then we have Mo Walters and Sina Schuster, who, well, you've done a number of different courses in different settings, Mo, haven't you? Yes. So I wrote down the title of one, which is Learning from Nature, Environment, Sustainability, and Culture. And you've held courses in places ranging from Costa Rica and Ecuador and other places I'm sure you can tell us about. So two really cool and I think somewhat contrasting study abroad experiences. So with that, maybe I'll jump in and Sarup, you and I can alternate asking questions, but since
Sure.
I'm already talking.
No problem. That sounds good.
Why don't we start just by having each of you first just introduce yourselves briefly. So say a little bit more about your background, who you are, what your role is in the college. Before then jumping in to tell us a bit about your study abroad experience. In particular, when did you start, why, and where? Well, we can say a little bit more about where and how long have you been running this program and maybe a little bit how it's evolved. So sorry, that's like 5 questions in one. But, Sarah, you want to jump in and start?
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask if Dr. Mo and Sina could go first in hopes that Michelle would show up. Okay, thanks.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, Dr. Mo.
Absolutely.
Sina.
So I'm Dr. Mo, and I'm a clinical professor within Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. And I think I have the most fun job. I get to do all of the science stuff that happens. And what's so great about doing science is everything we do in our life is science. So it connects to everything we do as educators, and it connects to everything we do just as individuals. I started my study abroad experience. Actually, the very first time I led a study abroad was in 1982, and it was taking high school students to Europe on a music study abroad, and that got me hooked. At that time, I was an attending educator, so I didn't run anything. I just showed up and I helped herd students through the streets of Italy. And then from there, all of a sudden I realized, you know what, this is where learning it's like where the rubber meets the road. This is where real learning takes place. Students not only get to see and hear it, but they're actually applying it. And I started running science study abroads all over. And the first one was actually to Disney World, teaching students about the physics of roller coasters. So as a physics teacher, it was perfect. Coming to ASU, 2005 was my very first study abroad. We went to Costa Rica. And since 2005, I've only missed 2 years of study abroad with ASU because of COVID. But we've been to Egypt, we've been to Costa Rica, we've been to Ecuador and the Galapagos. Oh my gosh, Kenya. We've been just kind of a little bit everywhere because science is happening everywhere. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sina. We're sharing a mic because we're actually in the same office.
So it's magic. I can talk on mute. My name is Sina, and I am not as well versed as Dr. Mo in study abroad. I started working in the EE program a couple of years back, the Environmental Education Certificate Program. This will be 2025 will be my 4th study abroad. It will make 3 to Costa Rica, and last year we went to Ecuador and Galapagos Islands. I'm learning as I go, and I think for me, one of the interesting facts is at the beginning, I was our students in the sense that I didn't have the travel and global experience, so I was kind of learning along with them and experience along with them, and I think that is part of the amazing thing is to see what we're doing in our courses and then watching the light switch go on when they see it in real world experiences. So that's one of the things I love about it. And every year to watch how excited they get when they see things and their cameras go up and you're watching it through their eyes, there's nothing like that. So What else? That's my short end of the story.
Well, and I think the one thing that probably Sina and I want to add is, when you think about a study abroad and you think about your content area, that's the icing on the cake. It's almost like an iceberg. There's all of these other levels that you can't see that is shaping the student based on the experience. So it's a academic, it's a personal, it's a social. Everything about the individual is being developed.
Yeah, and I think another interesting thing about study abroad is it's one thing for us to tell someone else's story, but for them to actually go to the place and hear the story from the person who's living it sheds a whole new light on the topic area. Because when we try to do justice to it, we can't do justice and give them what someone who's living it does.
Awesome. Wow. I love hearing it. Dr. Mo, I've heard your story so many times, but every time I just get chills hearing about it. And then Sina, you were so kind to me when I started at Mary Lou Fulton out on the Polytech campus, and just knowing that you now are partnering with Dr. Mo just makes my cheeks hurt. I'm smiling so big. It's awesome. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and explain my journey, which actually is a lot like Dr. Mo's. I studied abroad when I was in undergrad. My undergraduate degrees were not in education, right? So I studied abroad as part of my degree in Spanish in Spain, and knew from that point forward that international study and exploration was like in my blood. And I grew up in this tiny little town in Pennsylvania that had next to no diversity in it, and everyone spoke English. So, for me, that has always been my beacon, right? Is just this idea of making the world larger, right? And bringing young people into those spaces so they see just how big the world is. And that other people live and speak and interact very differently than we do in the United States of America. So that's always been my passion. I spent 9 years doing Manos a través de la frontera, which is hands across the border, with middle school students. I took them to Esperanza, Sonora, Mexico, and that was an amazing experience. Then I went on to taking high schoolers back to Spain because my heart belongs in Spain. And then I did my own master's degree in Guanajuato, León, Mexico. I did all of my studies in Spanish in that state. So for me, it, like Dr. Mo just said, and I didn't anticipate she was going to say that, I do it for what's underneath the water and of that iceberg, right? Like that's what motivates me. I can't imagine being an educator who in some way isn't involved in taking young people outside of the United States, right? So I'm going to hold off on how I started our program because I know some of the other questions that are coming up, but I will say that we tried to start our program in 2020. We all know what happened in that year. And so we had to give all our money back and not go. And then we waited and we didn't go in 2021 because we didn't want to wear masks and lots of things still weren't open. And so our first year was in May of 2022. We did have to wear masks and a lot of things were still closed in Germany. But we also went in 2023 last year. For personal reasons, Michelle and I couldn't go, but we now have enough students to qualify and go again in 2025. And our program is specifically a global intense experience, which I know in the next hour they're going to talk about specifically. And so later on, I'll explain how that type of program works versus a study abroad. Is that enough? Did I answer everything, Betty?
I think that's great for now. Yeah. And Michelle just joined us in the midst of your conversation. So Michelle, we were just starting and having everyone just briefly introduce themselves and say a little bit about how they got involved in study abroad. So Sarah's discussed a few of the specifics. It sounds like the two of you have collaborated on this since
Oh,
the
I
inception.
recruited Michelle. So
Oh,
so if you notice the passion for me was below the water of the iceberg, and then I was like,
Mhm.
oh wait, STEM education. I need somebody who's an expert in STEM to come with me. So that's how I found Michelle.
So, Michelle,
Yep.
would you just briefly introduce yourself and say a little bit about how this happened from your perspective and what got
Yeah.
you interested?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it happened exactly the way Sarah said it. We were at a faculty meeting. Faculty meetings are good for something. It was wonderful. We got to talking. She was really interested and passionate, and which of course is catching, right? So she got me excited about it. And because of my areas of research that I'm really interested in are in energy transition, so STEM education from an energy transition and sustainability perspective. As we developed our collaborative ideas about what we wanted to focus on for the program, we automatically kind of shifted towards STEM in reference to sustainable energies. And that works so well because Germany is one of the leaders, as some of you may know, in shifting towards renewable energy futures. So and they have a million amazing places to visit, both at the policy level and also at the at the level of community projects. So it's just a perfect fit. And Sarah's amazing. If you need a travel partner, I highly recommend her.
Thanks so much. And one question before we move on. I don't think you said is this an undergrad or grad course? What's the student population, or who is the student population that you recruit?
Yeah, so in ours, it's open to both. It's also open to non-ASU. They just have to pay the tuition for the 1 credit course. And we've had a mix of both. We've gotten a lot of support from online as well. And so we've had students who are not physically in Arizona, but enrolled in ASU courses online also join us in Germany. So it's
Very cool.
technically for like the name of our course is SCN 494. So it does carry an undergraduate credit in science.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and some of these details I'm sure will come up as we go further into the conversation, but it just occurred to me I didn't have an image of who the students were, or a general sense. So Sarup, do you want to move on and ask the next question?
Sure. So, with all these experiences, teaching abroad, and so we just wanted to know, how does it differ from teaching on campus? What kind of adaptations you have to make to accommodate the needs of an international setting? And if anything gets lost in translation, or if you discover some very creative kind of interpretations. So it's a loaded question, but basically asking about what does it look like to be teaching in that space?
Well, I'll jump in. For me, that's the nice thing about science. Science is a universal language, so it's really easy to transfer. But the way I teach, and I know some of you've seen me outside with my classes, teaching the science classes I teach. Yesterday, we were outside. We were running around looking for prickly pear yesterday and collecting prickly pear pads and looking at, aerials and all these little pieces here. So being able to do something like Costa Rica, and the reason I chose Costa Rica is because back in 2005, this was really just a Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College study abroad. And one of the things that I learned is almost all teachers at some point teach about the rainforest. And there were so many misconceptions about the rainforest that I thought the best way to teach them about the rainforest was to take them to the rainforest. And one of the most surprising things is, when you think about the rainforest, the word rain, the students were shocked at how much it rained. And it was like, we're in the rainforest. So trying to clean up, and clear up some of those misconceptions. So for me, it was just an extension of my classroom. It was looking at all the science standards that they're teaching in their K-8 classes, and then making those standards come to life by the outdoor setting that we had. Jamie, you want to say anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, everything she just said, and on top of that, in our introduction to environmental studies class, we talk a lot about a single story and what we hear in our space versus what you actually see in another space. And so, that idea of us standing over here saying stop cutting down the rainforest, and then going over there and realizing it's their livelihood, and balancing that thing. And I think some other challenges beyond teaching in the classroom is you're juggling 16, 20 different students that have just met, and they're shoved into small spaces, and balancing that along with education. And there's no place to go. You're with these people for the duration. So that, on top of educational needs, their emotional and just daily needs, throws kind of a twist into the education process.
And Sina referred to a single story. I don't know how many of you have actually seen the video. It's called A Single Story. It really talks about our preconceived ideas about different things. And obviously, when you travel to a different state, even within the US, or you go to a different country, you really have to address some of those single story ideas that you have about language and food and culture and what you might be thinking about a certain place.
And I will piggyback on, you have to be really honest about your own identity and how you are perceived in those countries, and the single story that the people who are from that country have of you the second they know you are an American. I find it super interesting. Of course, my background is in linguistics and culture, cultural competence. So I'm just like super aware of, this, the whole cycle of cultural shock that our students go through, and then helping them be very present in that moment and not getting discouraged, but moving through it and learning more about themselves in the process. And I think the first year Michelle and I went, we were just so excited to finally go that we kind of planned for those moments. And so we were like, gauging them like individually. And then the second year we like built in more meaningful, like debriefing times with the students, and giving them, we do like 3 meetings with them before we even go, so we can start building our own culture. But it just never surprises me to find out, like, it's the first time a student has ever gotten on an airplane. And I'm like, go big. Like, we're going to Germany from Arizona, and this is the first time you've been on an airplane. One year we had an online student. She was afraid of escalators. And so I literally had to like hold her hand and go up and down escalators with her, because this was just a fear of hers. And so you just like kind of never know what you're going to get. But for me, it's like the heart of what it's all about. And then, the students come out on the other side with all these life lessons, as well as applications of how teachers, educators, and community members in Germany are actually like living a sustainable lifestyle. It's shocking to them how the communities, these large cities, have invested in like the mission, right? And they come back kind of dealing with a little bit of a like American shame, right? Around like, why aren't we doing this? Like, this is not difficult. and so for me, it's kind of fun because we can get into the policy discussions about how, if you're going to do systemic change, it needs to happen at that level. And I've had the blessing of having a few of my students who have gone with us to Germany. I've had them in classes before we went, and then in classes after they go, and just the conversations that they bring into those educational spaces and the impact it has on their reflection process in these other courses that might not be necessarily STEM oriented, but they won't, like, it's in them now, like they can't let it go, and it's part of their thought process, and it's part of their mission now at their schools, because a lot of these students that went with us in 2022 are now teachers of record, and circling back to like, let me know like what they're doing at their schools based on what they experienced in Germany. So it's super rewarding.
Wow, it all just sounds so amazing. And I'm going to go a little bit off script here, and you started to address it, Sarah, because I was wondering how you prepare students for this kind of experience, because it sounds like you all have these broader goals, and you're all very aware that students are going to be experiencing sort of perspective, they're going to be transforming their perspectives in some ways by going into these other environments. They'll be encountering new cultures. I mean, can you share a little bit more specifically about what you do to prepare them for that? Because that's pretty big. That's a challenge.
Well, so yeah, so as I mentioned, I lean on Michelle to be the content expert, although I feel like my passion has always been in nature. I have an Eagle Scout as a son, and so I've spent lots of time right out there doing all the Boy Scout things. But my passion is, the cultural competence piece. And so we do some of that work. Like I talk to them ahead of time and I show them the research behind cultural shock so that they're aware that it's going to be coming. And then that way, when it does, and it happens, let's be honest, it doesn't happen to all of them like at the same time so that you can manage it that way. It happens to all of them in different phases. It can happen to some of the students like when we first land, in JFK out in New York to make our connecting, right? They're already in the shock stage. And so having like kind of intentionally and explicitly talked about that, and have students share, right, where they have already experienced it, if they have, because obviously there's students whose it's not their first time that they've traveled outside of the United States, or even to Dr. Mo's point, across the country, right? I grew up in Pennsylvania. I've now lived in Arizona longer than back there, but the two cultures of our two states are totally different. That really helps. And again, helps to build that community ahead of time, right? Those relationships between the students so that when it does start to occur, it's not a moment of panic or shame, but it's just a recognition. And then we're all, prepared to like move in and kind of, bring each other through it. You can ask Michelle, like I go through my own cultural shock every time I'm there. At some point I get homesick, right? And so, it never goes away. It's something that you always experience. It's just like a little less, I guess, traumatic for me now. Yeah, I guess that's what we do. So like I said, we meet with the students 3 times before. The first time's just a let's get to know you. We do a little bit of an activity around solar panels. Then we go to the research park, and Michelle has connections where we get to go in and actually see how the solar panels are created. And then the third time we meet is all about the nuts and bolts of the trip, like an orientation. But sprinkled in all of that is the cultural piece, and the idea of understanding. Well, I actually use the image of the iceberg, Dr. Mo, as part of that, discussion, and it really helps. And we have our students keep journals, like reflection journals, and they start them here with us in the States. They carry them with them every day when we're in Germany. And then it becomes a real informative piece for them for their final project.
I'll jump on that as well. I think the pre-planning is very critical. We also meet with our students before we go. I did a move from making it a Mary Lou Fulton Teacher College study abroad only to open to all students on ASU campus. So we've got engineers and people getting degrees in psychology or sustainability, and that has added a whole different shock in itself, because a lot of the teacher college students start to learn from the students who are in the School of Sustainability, and there's all of this sharing that occurs. So that pre-planning is really critical on what the students are expecting, what do they want to learn. We have them come up with a research question so that when we go, they can start talking to the scientists and other people that we're meeting and interacting with. The journaling is key. Having the students, we have them keep a list of, here's all of my first time on an airplane, first time on a boat, first time eating fish. I mean, that was a big thing in Costa Rica, or eating some of the fruits that they've never heard of and trying new things. And then we do nightly meetings where we get with the students. We talk about, what was your high for today? What was the most scariest thing of the day? So that they really have the chance to share some of the, I guess, same feelings and thoughts about the culture and the shock of it all. One of my favorites, though, is when they come home. Obviously, when you're there, you're really trying to be conscientious. I do a whole thing about no waste. We're not wasting any food, so really watch what you're trying. We do sampling, so we use the smaller plates so that they have to go back for seconds or thirds, so we're not wasting food, and trying things, at least one new thing, and recording that in the journal. But I think one of the things that I love the most is hearing from them. We usually try to get together 2 weeks after we get home, and then we meet up with them at least a month again later, so that they can share some of the culture shock and the changes that they're making in their own life once they're home. Even little things of, why we're in Costa Rica, you can't throw toilet paper in the toilet. It's got to go in a bucket next to the toilet, and really being conscientious about, you've got a 3-minute shower, and how those habits are changing once they get home. Seen anything?
Well, I mean, obviously our experiences are similar, but I think some other things we do is, before they're even in our program, we interview them just to kind of give them a little taste of what will happen, what could happen, what is going to happen, answer any of their questions to try to ease their nerves. And then we do meet prior to, and probably like Sarah's program, we have a lot of online students.
Yeah.
So we'll make arrangements to Zoom them in, and we'll have a phone there or a tablet there so they can join the group ahead of time. And we also have them wait to buy their flight tickets so that they know what airport we're flying out of. And so we try to all meet at the same airport and fly out. So if they haven't, they may have virtually met us, but then they could physically meet us and actually make those physical connections with their peers.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just super impressed by all the thought and care that you put into setting up the students to have a successful experience. It's, part of me says, wow, that sounds like a lot more work than you'd put into a regular class, but
Can you all
maybe
hear
not.
me?
Michelle, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So sorry, Betty.
Great.
I just wanted to add something, but then I heard you say it sounds like a lot more work than a regular class. And I do think it's easy to underestimate like how much prep work needs to go into these kinds of things. It's a lot of care. There's a lot of care and caring acts that have to go into this. And I think another thing that I think Sarah is so great at is having those her eyes and mind scanning for issues that might come up. I also want to point out how much time we spend huddling with students, individual students, pairs of students. So while we're in country, there's a lot of huddles. And this is one of the reasons that I think it's so critically important that two people are collaborating to lead the trip because there are a lot of asides, and it's part of that caring, that work of care that has to be done.
Thanks, Michelle. No, that's great. Yeah, I really appreciate how you framed it in terms of care and care for the whole student, because it is a totally immersive experience. And the fact that they're having so many firsts, I guess, is both, a real positive, but also a little intimidating, I think. So maybe we can just pause. Does anyone else have other questions? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Sarut to ask the next one. But
I do want to hear from Sam. Sam has extensive experience of, working in this global, landscape. And I just wanted to hear him about his reflections about what is it like for you, Sam?
Great.
Oh, interesting. Let's see. No, I mean, thank you, Sarup, and listening to all of your descriptions. You probably saw me nodding my head in agreement, not nodding off. Yeah, and I've not done formal study abroad.
Yeah.
We have, as Sarup's mentioning, been involved in college-based activities, and actually also going back to the 2000s, I think up until around 2007, I was involved in some special education student teaching placements in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and we were setting one up in Peru, and then with the reorganization of the college and that sort, and some other changes in policy, those were dissolved. But we had maintained them for several years with Dr. Artiles Rutherford and I in particular. And I definitely agree with one of the statements that was made that, it helps to do it at least with, to engage in this at least with another colleague, faculty member. There are a lot of components in the planning as well as the support and the implementation piece. But you all are far more experienced with that than I. But as I said, I know that you could likely see me nodding in agreement as you were speaking, because we encountered those a lot of those ongoing. And as well, it certainly is more preparation as well as ongoing implementation investment than a traditional, if there is traditional anymore. Are there traditional courses anymore? Yeah. So you've hit it. And right now, and I'm here today, of course, to hear your experiences with study abroad in particular, and as we look at ways that perhaps we build this in to some of our graduate programs, as well as looking at it as a possibility. Amanda may speak to this for the behavior management undergraduate minor. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything specific to add. Thank you for handing me the microphone, Saru.
Well, that's okay. All right, so we heard a lot, and in some subtle ways, I think you have also, because you're invested in this because you see something different when you come back, right? So what are some of those unexpected benefits that you have noticed? Some of those you already said, the transformation that happens, the worldview that changes. Anything else that you would like to add to?
Okay, I'm going to add, and then I'll be quiet. No,
okay.
And I because I didn't touch upon any of the value that we saw with our students, and from, as I said, this was special education, teacher preparation, teacher cert. We had arranged these placements in conjunction with the American schools so that their student teaching experience would then be recognized toward their credential in the US. And the experience that our participants, that our students or then teachers came back with was something that we, I don't know that that was something that we could provide them in exceptional placements in the US, adding that international level of experience, of direct hands-on experience of interaction with the community, with the structure, with the education structure, all while dealing or applying their areas of expertise and interest in special education. A lot of our conversations while we were carrying out this program was, well, for those who can't participate in the international aspect, how can we build this into the program? And we never really, from my perspective, my observation, we never really hit that piece. So yeah, okay, I'm done.
Okay, all right.
Any
other changes? Benefits?
I think one of the unexpected benefits is students find a piece in themselves that they never knew. They come back with more confidence. They discover abilities they never realized they had. Some of our students go there and realize that, biodiversity, conservation, something that's what they want their focus to be, and they end up doing internships. I think that it becomes about life and not about school anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that they're young adults, and you know that they're like looking, because we tend to take mostly juniors and seniors. We took 2 sophomores a couple years ago, which was really rewarding, because then I feel like they had the seed set earlier, that then they can start having that lens when they get into the classrooms, and they're specifically choosing to be with mentor teachers who focus on science, right? So that's exciting. But you kind of step back and you're like, oh, these are really formative years. Like they're kind of choosing like where they're going to go and how they're going to do it. And their world gets turned upside down, right? And definitely for the better. And I think it's super rewarding when it's a student that I've taught, like Dr. Mo, right, in a course at Mary Lou Fulton. And then you have that experience with them there. And then to have them again, you just know them like on such a personal level, and they just tell you how their life, their perspective of themselves in their life has transformed. And it's, yeah, for me, I'm like, yay, this is exactly what I was hoping for. And you don't get to hear that from all the students. I think for some of them, we're in Europe, right? I'll be honest. I know some students come on the trip because they just want to go to Europe. But
Yeah.
when they get there and they see how busy our itinerary is and how focused it is on the purpose behind the trip, we get them. It's almost like a jarring surprise, right? And I'm like, we're pretty transparent about this before you decided to confirm. And yet, we still allow for, some free time where they can actually enjoy just being in Germany, because the different cities that we go to and the cultures of those cities are very different. Freiburg is a university town. It's like Tempe, right? And they love it. But then we go into the Black Forest community, and some of the students are a little intimidated because there's like, sheep everywhere and windmills everywhere. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, don't worry, there'll be a toilet you can use, or I'll show you how to kappa squat. And so it just, the trip in itself, it's only 11 or 12 days. It depends, because we always want to keep it affordable. So we fluctuate the number of days we go. It's quick. I'm pretty sure, Dr. Mo, your exchanges are longer. But you're aware of all those things, and you just get to see a different transformation in each student. But I'm confident every student that goes doesn't come back the same person.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing that I'd share is, obviously study abroad broadens horizons, and it broadens their little world to a much larger world, but it also makes them think more globally when they're looking at professions. A lot of them say, oh, I'm going to stay in Arizona to do this. And then after being abroad, they're like, you know, the United States is pretty big, but the world is even bigger. So their view about prospective professions just balloons.
So how can we get more folks involved in planning study abroad experiences or programs? What advice, and I mean, you can give us, you know, specific advice for faculty interested in this, but what do you think would get people engaged in this more? Any of our participants or anyone here? I don't know if is anyone here because they're interested in creating a study abroad program or course or encouraging other faculty to do so?
Betty, can I just throw out probably one of our biggest challenges is funding. I think funding is a really big piece. I think more students would do study abroad. I never got to do study abroad because I could never afford it as a student. But I think funding is a real critical piece. We talk about Mary Lou Fulton, you know, supporting this. And when I first came to ASU, we actually had a student teaching relationship with Costa Rica, and I went the first 2 years in 04 and 05 with them being over there for an entire semester. But funding is a huge issue for students to be able to go.
Well, and there are some scholarships, or there's some scholarship money. Is that correct?
There is some for Global Education Office, and they've added a few, but according to our students, they're difficult to receive.
Got it.
And I know a lot of the other colleges actually provide scholarships. I know Mary Lou Fulton is not quite to that level. Some of the other colleges are in terms of funding 10 to 12 students. So we don't have that kind of funding or haven't had that kind of opportunity.
Yet. I love that word yet, Dr. Mo. We're going to keep trying to make it happen. I'm always looking for ways in those like small scholarship things that come out in our faculty emails, like, could I do that? Could we do that to help pay for the students? I will say one thing that's worked so far for us, and I don't know the specific data, but I would say it's been at least a quarter of the students that have gone with us. We had 9 students the first year. We had 18 students the second year. We currently have 12 that are ready to go on 2025. But the ASA scholarship that Mary Lou Fulton students get, right? That's the scholarship that if for the number of semesters that you receive the scholarship, you then go on to work in a Title I school. One of my students, or one of our students that was in the first year, found out that that scholarship would actually pay for the trip. And that made a huge difference. I don't think otherwise she would have come. And so once I realized that, I advertised that with any student who lands on our application page. And that can be like a real, deal changer for a lot of them. I literally just came from another in-person panel out here on the West Campus and had a handful of students approach me afterwards because, of course, I had to plug RTI in Germany, Michelle. And right away, that's what they mentioned. Oh, I don't know, because I'm honest, it's not cheap. And so I'm like, well, if you really want to do this, then get applied now. Thankfully, the Global Education Office waived the application fee. So it used to be a $50 investment. Now it's nothing to apply, which is great. I thought that was an unnecessary hurdle before that's now gone. And then I immediately hit them with all the Global Education Office scholarships, which I believe for Mary Lou Fulton, the deadline for that is November 1st. So that opportunity is about to end. And then I hit them with the ASA. And I literally had a student say to me, well, I don't have that scholarship yet, but I'd like to get it. And I'm like, okay, I'll send you the information for it. Maybe you won't go with us this year. Maybe you can go with us, the next year, because she's a freshman. I was talking to a bunch of freshmen today, and I kind of thought in the back of my mind, I really don't want to take you this year. You're a freshman. Let's just wait, like let you mature a little bit. But that's the biggest thing. It's the what I spend the most time on is trying to help students afford the trip.
I want to I echo all the student funding issues, absolutely. As the question is also about how can we get more teachers, college faculty involved in developing and leading. This is a great, it's not often on the agenda, I think is part of the why people don't do more, because like this just an hour puts it on the agenda. And I think people, in order to imagine themselves doing something, need lots of pings, right? So I think pinging people. Also, the reward structure isn't at all clear, right? Like how does that integrate developing? Number one, developing. How does that integrate into your professional responsibilities? And then leading, how does that integrate into your responsibilities? That's not at all clear. And even now, we've had, very little conversation to date with the college about that. So I think maybe some that as if we want more of these kinds of opportunities, number one, so that we're not competing for students, but we're for a small pool of students, but competing for a large pool of students, we've got to figure out the student funding issue. But then also we need some conversations to make clear, like, how does this activity fit into our work?
Fabulous points. And I mean, the equity issue is huge. I am aware of larger conversations, certainly beyond our university, about how the more privileged students tend to be the ones who get the study abroad programs, but they're probably the ones who've already been able to travel internationally and whatever. So making this more accessible to students who would not otherwise have that opportunity seems incredibly important. So, and I do appreciate, Michelle, you're right. I mean, I haven't heard many conversations at the college level about the structures for getting faculty involved and how we think about that in terms of their workload. And as you said, reward structures. So I think we're getting some action items here that we can pursue for the future. So yeah. And Sarup, we have like 1 minute left. Do you want to wrap us up? The conversation went by so quickly, and I think it's because everyone was just so enthusiastic. I'm leaving, even despite these challenges, feeling really energized. So thank you for that. Sarup, wrap us
Just
up.
a reminder that we have another Just an Hour on November 1st that would focus on professional learning and grants. So please join us. And I want to really thank all the panelists today for being, here and really sparking this, I think, very new kind of an interest into this, space, and really appreciate your experience and your insights, that we can all benefit from.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh. Yeah. And then we'll transition into our next session I think looks like our guests are already here. So if you're interested in more specifics about how to create a study abroad experience, please stay with us. If not, feel free to log out. And thank you again for coming.